You left her there to die because of the rules? The words didn't come from a protest sign or a courtroom, but from a calm, dark-skinned trauma nurse named Marcus Ellison. As he stood in the administrator's office at St. Luke's Hospital, his voice low but sharp enough to cut through the cold Indiana air. Just 24 hours earlier, he had knelt in the mud beside a bleeding woman, her ribs broken, blood soaking through her designer blouse as she struggled to breathe along a narrow trail outside Brown County. No ambulance in sight, no paperwork, no protocol. Just one decision: act or watch her die. He chose to act, and for that, they chose to fire him. But the world would soon be stunned when it learned the identity of the woman he saved. If this story touches your heart, don't just scroll past. Hit the subscribe button, leave your voice in the comments, and stay, because what happened next proved that sometimes the most powerful revolutions begin with one man, one act of compassion, and one woman who refused to be judged by appearance. The sun burned high over Indiana's southern hills that Tuesday afternoon when Marcus Ellison got the emergency call. A trauma nurse at St. Luke's Hospital in Indianapolis, Marcus was no stranger to chaos. But this wasn't the usual ER code blue. The hospital's rural emergency response line had received a frantic alert from a ranger station near Brown County State Park. A woman had fallen during a solo nature photo shoot. Multiple injuries, unknown identity, condition critical. The nearest ambulance was nearly 30 minutes away. The air medevac team had been grounded due to wind shear. If anyone was going to reach her in time, it had to be someone from the hospital who knew what to do and could move fast. Marcus grabbed his trauma kit and drove himself in the hospital's Jeep Cherokee toward the ridge, the instructions still playing on the dispatch radio. She's on Ridgecrest Trail, past the North Overlook, near marker 17B. She's conscious, but deteriorating. He had no idea then that his next decision would end his entire career. When he reached the trailhead, a ranger flagged him down. "This way. She's down the embankment, about a quarter-mile in." Marcus jogged after him, heart pounding, sweat already soaking through his scrubs. The hike down was rocky, slick from the morning's drizzle. He slid once, cursed, but kept going. Finally, they reached a clearing where he saw her. A tall woman in her late 20s, her body twisted awkwardly near the base of a shallow ravine. White sundress stained red, heels discarded nearby. Her face was bruised and bloodied, eyes barely open, breathing shallow. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Marcus dropped to his knees. Her lips parted, slipped, couldn't breathe, pain. And then she passed out. He checked her pulse, faint. At least 2 ribs broken. Blood pooled at her hip, likely internal bleeding. No time to wait for backup. "I'm going to help you," he whispered, more to himself than to her. With the ranger's help, he stabilized her leg, administered oxygen from the emergency kit, and started field triage. But she was going fast. "We need to move. Now." Back at the hospital, Marcus burst through the emergency bay doors, with the ranger pushing the stretcher. "Female, mid-20s, unknown identity, probable hemothorax, multiple fractures, vitals unstable," he called out. Staff scrambled, startled. This wasn't a scheduled drop-off. He hadn't cleared it through admin. Dr. Carrington, the on-call physician, rushed to his side. "Where'd this come from?" "Backcountry fall," Marcus replied breathlessly. "They couldn't wait. She would have died." He stayed to help, ignoring the stares from Donna Lewis, the head charge nurse, who stood at the nurse's station with arms crossed and a frown deepening with every word. They stabilized the woman. Her heart was weak, but beating. A CT scan showed internal trauma, but she was alive. Marcus stayed at her side until she was wheeled into surgery. That should have been the end of it. A life saved. Another day in the ER. But St. Luke's wasn't about compassion anymore. It was about control. The next morning, Marcus was summoned to a disciplinary meeting with no legal support, no advocate, just cold faces behind a table. Hospital administrator Thomas Carr didn't even let him sit. "Marcus Ellison," he said with corporate finality, "you are terminated, effective immediately." Marcus's breath caught. "Excuse me? You admitted a patient without clearance, without ID, and no insurance verification. That breaks multiple hospital policies." "She was dying," Marcus answered, trying to stay calm. "I did what I was trained to do." Carr shook his head. "You did what you felt. That's not protocol. You put the hospital at risk." And with that, the door to his future slammed shut, or so they thought. "So what should I have done?" he snapped. "Let her die on a trail?" Carr looked unmoved. "That woman could have been a sex worker, or worse. Your job isn't to play hero. It's to follow the rules." Marcus's hands curled into fists. "You're punishing me for saving a woman you didn't think was worth helping because of how she looked." Carr's mouth tightened. "That's enough. You're dismissed. Leave your badge and coat with Donna at the desk." As he walked out, co-workers stared. Some looked away. Others whispered. Not one came to his defense. He drove home in silence, the echo of Carr's words replaying in his head. She could have been a vagrant. Marcus hadn't thought about her outfit. He saw pain, blood, a dying woman. But they saw liability, risk. His modest ranch-style house on Brookdale Street felt colder than usual. He fed his dog Max, sat on the couch, and stared at the ceiling. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Then another, and another. Finally, he answered. "Mr. Ellison, my name is Charles Beckett. I represent Valerie Cross." His stomach dropped. "The patient? Is she okay?" "She's stable, recovering. But I'm calling because she asked me to find you immediately. She said, and I quote, 'Find the man who saved my life. I owe him more than a thank you.'" Marcus didn't know what to say. "I was just doing what any nurse would do." "No, Mr. Ellison, that's not true," Beckett replied. "You did what very few people would do. You acted without judgment, and that matters." Outside, engines revved. He peeked through the blinds. At first, he thought it was a mistake. But there they were, 10 luxury cars, one after the other, gliding down his street like a silent procession. A cherry-red Rolls-Royce, 2 black BMWs, a white Tesla Model X, even a sleek obsidian Lamborghini with matte rims and dark-tinted windows. Neighbors peeked out. Some stepped onto porches. Kids on bikes slowed down to stare. From the first car stepped a woman in a form-fitting cream dress and a pair of heels that had no business walking on gravel. Her blonde hair was tied up, her makeup perfect, despite the fresh bandage on her temple. Marcus stepped outside, stunned. "Valerie Cross," she said, extending a manicured hand. "And you're Marcus Ellison, the man who refused to let me die." Marcus hadn't said a word. He stood frozen on his porch, still in the wrinkled gray sweatshirt he had thrown on after getting home. His breath caught somewhere between disbelief and shock. Valerie's handshake was surprisingly strong, her eyes focused and intense despite the stiffness in her step. "I wanted to thank you in person," she said, her voice rich with both grace and conviction. "You didn't know who I was, but you helped anyway. That's rare. That matters. Marcus blinked, trying to form a response. You were injured. You needed help. You just saved my life, she finished for him, her head tilting slightly. And in doing that, you revealed something much uglier than you could have known. Behind her, several men and women in tailored suits stood by the luxury vehicles. Neighbors had now gathered in small groups, whispering, pointing, watching like they were witnessing the start of something huge. Valerie gestured to a slate-gray Bentley parked nearby. Can we talk? Marcus nodded and followed her to the car. Inside, the temperature dropped, cocooned from the world outside. One of the assistants handed him a tablet. Before we begin, Valerie said, I want you to understand who I am, what happened after you saved me, and why I'm not going to let them get away with what they did to you. The screen lit up with a high-resolution photo of Valerie in a sparkling silver gown, standing next to the governor of Illinois at a philanthropic gala. I run cross-group media. We handle image, influence, and information for half the entertainment world. I was in Indiana visiting a new property near the state park. I went for a hike, cleared my head, lost my footing, no phone, no ID. I didn't even look like myself, but you didn't hesitate. She paused. You acted like my life mattered. Marcus sat quietly processing. I was conscious, she continued. I heard the nurse whisper, Is she a dancer or something? I heard the pause before they helped me. Then I heard they fired you. Fired you for being human. Marcus looked down. They said I broke protocol, put the hospital at risk. Valerie leaned forward. You didn't put them at risk. You put them under a spotlight. And now that spotlight is mine. You're a billionaire. You could buy that hospital 10 times over. Yes, she said with a small smile, crossing one leg over the other, her fitted cream dress hugging her frame, heels tapping lightly against the car floor. But I'm still a woman who was left to die because a nurse thought I didn't look like I belonged. The silence between them thickened. That place, Marcus muttered. St. Luke's used to be about care, real care. But the last few years, it's changed. More restrictions, more policies, less humanity. Valerie leaned forward, her eyes locked onto his. What if I told you we could change that? Not just St. Luke's, but places like it all over the country? Marcus looked up, surprised. What are you talking about? I want to expose them, Valerie said. Not just for firing you, for every patient they rejected, every nurse they punished for speaking out, every life they gambled for the sake of profit. But I can't do it alone. I need your help. You want me to go public? He asked. Not right away, she replied gently. Start by telling me your story, my legal team, the investigators we've hired. We've already got former staff ready to talk, but we need one voice, one face, and that's you. Marcus hesitated. You think anyone would believe me? Valerie's gaze didn't waver. They'll believe you because it's true, and because we already have the footage. He blinked. Footage? You didn't know. The nurses station at St. Luke's records both video and audio. Your argument with Carr, the comments, the tone. We have it all. Marcus sat back, stunned. How? An IT tech who used to work there, she said. She left last year after reporting patient record tampering. We hired her 2 weeks ago. She saved everything. It's damning, and it's going public. Marcus stared out the car window, watching as his street swirled with onlookers, and whispered curiosity. This could ruin people's lives, he said. Valerie's voice was calm but sharp. They ruined their own lives. We're just bringing it to light. In the days that followed, Marcus worked closely with Valerie's team. He recorded his full testimony, turned over emails, internal memos, old texts, things he once thought were meaningless. They mattered. Former colleagues began to reach out. Dr. Samir, a Latino ER physician who'd been denied promotion 3 times. A young aide who'd been reprimanded for helping a Medicaid patient after hours. Even a janitor who'd overheard Carr bragging about how many unnecessary patients they'd turned away. Bit by bit, the system's mask began to slip. Meanwhile, Valerie moved strategically. She called her media partners, arranged background interviews with investigative reporters, and leaked internal policies to a national healthcare advocacy group. The fuse was lit, and Marcus, quiet and reluctant at first, became the match. The turning point came late one afternoon when Marcus found a certified envelope in his mailbox. At first, he thought it was another bill, but when he opened it, his stomach turned. A legal threat. A cease and desist letter from Carr's law firm, warning him to stop defaming the hospital or face consequences. Marcus took the letter straight to Valerie. She read it once and then smirked. "Perfect," she said. "They're scared." That evening, they released the first video. It was simple, just Marcus sitting on his porch, looking directly into the lens. No flash, no production, just truth. "My name is Marcus Ellison. I was a trauma nurse at St. Luke's Hospital for 15 years. I was fired for saving a woman's life. A woman I didn't know, who had no ID, who didn't fit their image of who deserved to be helped. Because I didn't follow their rules, they threw me out. This is my story." The video exploded online. Tens of thousands of views in hours. Then hundreds of thousands. Then millions. People flooded the comments with their own stories of being dismissed in ERs, neglected by doctors, charged for care they never received. The hashtag #Marcus Did Right trended for days. Interviews followed, major networks, podcasts, health policy panels. But Marcus stayed grounded. "This isn't about me," he said again and again. "It's about everyone they turned away, everyone they let die." Back at St. Luke's, panic set in. Hallways buzzed with whispers. Staff wondered who would be next. Carr hastily called a press conference to clarify misinformation, but it crumbled as soon as reporters started quoting the leaked footage. "Is it true you said that man doesn't belong here? Did you implement appearance-based screening criteria?" Carr fumbled. The truth was out, and the reckoning had begun. Marcus didn't seek revenge. He didn't celebrate. He just kept showing up, telling the truth, helping Valerie's team build something bigger. Because, for him, this was never about being right. It was about making it right. And now, there was no turning back. By the end of the second week, Marcus Ellison's face had been on every major news network, from CNN to local Indiana morning shows. He was no longer just the nurse who got fired. He had become a symbol, not of outrage, but of integrity. He spoke calmly, plainly, always steering away from personal attacks, but never avoiding the truth. And the more he spoke, the more people stopped to listen. And when they listened, they responded. Letters began pouring into his small mailbox on Brookdale Street. Some were handwritten from retired couples who remembered a time when hospitals treated people, not bank accounts. Others came from young nurses in New York, Oregon, even Alaska. New grads, uncertain whether they could stay in a profession where doing the right thing came with such a cost. Donations showed up too: cards, flowers, food boxes, and eventually checks. He'd refused the first few, but Valerie insisted he accept them. "They're not paying you," she said, brushing her perfectly curled blonde hair over one shoulder, dressed in a crisp silk blouse and designer heels. "They're thanking you." Meanwhile, the legal case against St. Luke's was gaining momentum. What started as a wrongful termination complaint had evolved into a full-blown federal investigation. The leaked recordings, Carr's dismissive tone, the blatant policy discussions about denying care, the bonuses for turning patients away, set off alarms at the Department of Health and Human Services. Then came the trail of evidence. Internal emails Marcus had quietly saved, not knowing they'd ever be useful. Budget cuts aimed squarely at underserved wards. Memos encouraging aggressive screening in what they called high-risk zip codes. The hospital board tried to claim they had no knowledge, but it was too late. Whistleblowers lined up. A physician's assistant who'd been ordered to discharge a black mother with severe complications. A billing coordinator told to delay Medicaid claims. Even members of the cafeteria staff came forward, recounting how they were told to escort certain patients out the back when they couldn't pay. PR firms were hired, scripted apologies were issued, and Carr was placed on administrative leave. But the damage was done. The public had seen it, heard it, believed it. In one televised interview, a reporter asked Marcus, "What does justice mean to you now?" He thought for a moment, then answered, "Justice isn't about firing someone. It's about making sure this never happens again. It's about building something better, not just pointing fingers at the broken parts." Behind the scenes, Valerie was already planning the next step. "We don't just expose it," she told Marcus one night in the back of a candle-lit restaurant downtown. She wore a sleek, shoulder-bearing black dress, but her tone was all business. "We replace it with something that actually treats people like people." Marcus raised a brow. "That's going to cost a lot." Valerie smiled, sipping her wine. "Good thing I have rich friends." Within a week, the Cross Foundation announced a bold initiative, the Ellison Project, a healthcare reform model focused on dignity-first clinics, with the first site to be built right in Indianapolis, led by none other than Marcus himself. At first, he tried to decline. "I'm not a CEO," he told her. "I'm a nurse. I belong in scrubs, not in a boardroom." But Valerie shook her head, her diamond earrings catching the light. "That's why you're exactly who should lead it. We've had enough executives. What we need is someone who's been on the floor, holding a patient's hand when the system looked away." Construction began just 8 weeks after the announcement. The location, an abandoned urgent care center barely 4 blocks from St. Luke's. It was gutted and rebuilt from the inside out. Solar energy, wide-open waiting areas, private rooms with soundproof walls, staff who spoke 5 languages between them. Marcus visited the site every day, clipboard in hand, boots muddy, hard hat on. He didn't give speeches. He focused on people. Nurses who led with empathy, doctors who listened, admins who knew every name, every story. The grand opening wasn't scheduled until spring, but word spread fast. Patients were already lining up. Some waited 4 hours just to register. An elderly woman, 68 years old, wept when told she didn't need to pay up front. "I never thought I'd live to see a place like this," she whispered. Marcus just smiled. "Now you have." Meanwhile, back at St. Luke's, the consequences were swift and unforgiving. Carr was indicted on federal charges ranging from civil rights violations and Medicaid fraud to destruction of medical records. He appeared in court pale and shaken, a hollow shell of the smug administrator who had once fired Marcus without hesitation. The hospital's board disbanded within weeks. Federal oversight teams moved in. By the time the first snow fell over Indianapolis, nearly half the staff had either resigned or been replaced. The hospital that once stood as a beacon of elite care had become ground zero for one of the most transformative reckonings in American health care. The morning of the news center's ribbon-cutting ceremony was crisp and bright. Snowflakes danced lazily under a silver sky as Marcus Ellison stood beside the freshly unveiled sign, the Ellison Center. Dignity in every life. His father stood beside him, teary-eyed and proud, gripping Marcus's shoulder with a firm hand. His younger brother Darius streamed the moment live to thousands online. From the crowd emerged Valerie Cross, radiant in a fitted white coat over a scarlet dress that shimmered as she walked, heels clicking softly on the pavement. "Are you ready?" she asked, a sly smile tugging at her lips. Marcus scanned the gathering, hundreds of faces from every walk of life, former patients, reporters, senators, medical students, community elders. "No," he answered, voice warm and real. "But I'm doing it anyway." The ribbon fell, cheers erupted, and with it, a new era quietly took root. Inside, sunlight poured over the gleaming tile floors. Children colored in the waiting room. Bilingual nurses greeted patients by name. No one asked for insurance before offering care. The building felt alive, open, welcoming, healing. In the following months, the Ellison Center became more than a clinic. It became a blueprint. Medical schools sent researchers. Federal agencies requested briefings. Philanthropic foundations offered grants. Satellite clinics began forming in Cleveland, Detroit, Memphis. People stopped referring to it as Marcus's project. They began calling it what it truly was, a movement. Despite the rising attention, Marcus never left the floor. He still did 2 rounds a day, still held the hands of frightened children, still spent long evenings returning patient calls just to check in. When reporters asked why, his answer never changed. Because what saved Valerie's life wasn't policy. It wasn't some institution. It was a nurse who didn't walk away when it mattered. Exactly 1 year after his termination, Marcus took the stage at the National Nurses Association conference in Washington, D.C. He wore a charcoal suit, his voice calm but charged with sincerity as he stepped to the podium. "I never wanted fame," he began. "I never wanted to trend or testify. All I ever wanted was to be the person you hoped for when your world was falling apart. The one who showed up, no matter what, that's it. And maybe I was lucky. I helped someone who could make the world listen. But we shouldn't need luck. We should have systems built on compassion, not compliance, on dignity, not dollars." The standing ovation was long and loud. For the first time in his life, Marcus Ellison understood what it meant to be heard, not just by a single patient, but by a nation ready to rebuild.